Dude, okay, so it's 2 p.m. there, so you've been working all day already.
Yeah. It's a full day almost for me.
Yeah, do you start early?
I do. I prefer to start. I know it sounds a bit crazy, man. I like getting up. My body kind of naturally wakes me up between 5 and 6, and then I like to get going at like 7, 8 o'clock. I just find I'm more creative in the morning, and that's where I feel like the most energy. And after lunch, I kind of normally have a little crash, a little dip. So um, yeah,
That's actually really good info for the creatives who are going to be watching this. So the podcast has already started. We've
cool.
started with the early morning
Straight
thing.
in.
Straight in. So this is Eliott Glinn.
Yeah, Glenn. That's it. Yeah.
And where are you located?
I'm in London in the UK.
Oh, you're straight up in London. Okay.
Yeah, I mean, I'd say London. I'm literally right on. I'm the furthest west. Never each. Yeah, the furthest west you can get with it. Still kind of calling it London. It's a place called Uxbridge.
Okay.
Um, so I'm still technically on the tube and everything, but I mean, it's debatable whether you could call it London. But I say I am. So just for the clout.
Yeah, well, you got to, I mean,
Yeah.
if someone has no reference for where I'm at, like Akron, Ohio is one level, but then if they don't know that, then I just say Cleveland area.
You're right. Yeah.
So
Yeah.
everybody knows Cleveland. Most people know LeBron James.
Right. Yeah. Even over here, we know him.
um, I'll just kind of give a little background here. You reached out to me a few months ago, and you'd listened to some tunes of mine, and then we just kind of connected on music in general. I started following you
Yep.
on Instagram, and I noticed that even though you label yourself as a mixing and mastering engineer, for starters, you have instruments in your studio. So I know that you're
Yes.
not just doing the controls, but then I started seeing that you have some great content out there about songwriting, creativity in general, and so I said, "What's this guy all about?" He there's more than meets the eye here, and so I just kind of would love to hear like a little bit about who you are and like how you got started into music.
Yeah, brilliant. Well, thank you. I really appreciate you saying that about the content and stuff I put out because um, I put a lot of kind of time and energy into that, so I'm glad it kind of comes across. Um, but yeah, I mean, I started probably how most engineers do, being a musician myself. I've been playing guitar since I was about 8 years old, and just from then was kind of hooked on just music. That was all I wanted to do in life. But like a lot of people, I was kind of struggling to find where I fit in that whole world. I was like, do I want to be an artist? Do I want to be a recording engineer? Do I want to be X, Y, Z? And I think it was just over the years I got to a point where I'd gone to university to do a music production course, which was the most broad spectrum course ever. There was no specifics at all. It was like a module on recording, it was a module on music history, it was a module on mixing, it was a module on, just we covered everything. And through that, I kind of found that I really enjoyed the technical aspect of mixing. It was a bit I was worst at as well. I could, put a microphone up and record a guitar, put a microphone up, record something, but the mixing, getting it sounding good, baffled me. But I really enjoyed the technical challenge of it. So, yeah, since then I've just kind of gone all in on that, and then through necessity, I kind of started doing mastering as well. A lot of clients were asking about it, and budgets aren't the biggest, so I started diving deep on that, and more I'm really enjoying doing that side of it as well. So yeah, that's kind of the brief history of me in music.
Dude, that's awesome. Mastering is such a mind bender and was for me for years and years until I was working with a client that oh, I felt so terrible. They had this beautiful like kind of lo-fi folk recording, and
Right.
whoever had mastered it had either just uploaded it to like Lander or had run it through Ozone without dialing in any of the controls, and
Yep.
it was so bad that I said, "Hey, can I try to master this for
Yeah.
you? Because it's such a great song, and so they ruined it." And but so that was the first time I got into mastering. Like, what kind of drove you into being able to call yourself a mastering engineer?
Yeah, it's kind of something similar. It wasn't that I'd heard train wrecks exactly of what other people have done, but I've heard when I first started out, other people mastering my mixes. And again, I don't know if they were professional mastering engineers, if they're just someone's friend, or they just uploaded it to something like Lando or done it themselves. But again, the mixes came back not how I left them, basically. And not saying that my mixes were perfect, far from it. I know, especially in the early days, I was finding my feet with it, but they didn't represent what I heard. And so I was like, well, let me have a go at mastering and see if I can get a better job. And I've always just gone with the idea that less is more with mastering as well.
Yeah.
Each step of the process, somebody's already signed off on it. So the recording process, the artist is happy with how everything sounds recording-wise. Production-wise, the artist is normally happy with how it sounds. Once you got to the mix, you shouldn't, once you've mixed it, you shouldn't really be changing a huge amount. And so I've always just tried to go, less is more with mastering. And then that way I don't need to be the most technically proficient, amazing mastering engineer. As long as I can get it sounding competitive, sounding good, there's no issues with it. That's kind of where I found myself, doing on my own productions, or own mixes, I should say. I still do like using other mastering engineers when I can and when the budgets are there, just for that second pair of ears. But yeah, kind of similar thing to you. I was like, other people are doing this, or they're not doing it as well. Let me just give it a go. And yeah, that's kind of how I wound up doing it as well.
Dude, that's awesome. I mean, it sounds like, I think the biggest difference I'm picking up so far in the 5 minutes of knowing you is that you enjoy the technical side of the challenge. And I have, in the last 2 years since I went kind of full-time into music, I am realizing that my giftedness in mixing and mastering peaks here, whereas like my other kind of creative endeavors of songwriting and performing seem like the growth opportunities keep going. So I'm like fully focused in on songwriting and just the producing creative part of things. But in your world, how does songwriting interface with what you do on a day-to-day basis?
Yeah, I mean, to me, honestly, songwriting makes my job like 10 times easier, 100 times easier. Well-written songs, well-produced songs, well-recorded songs. I don't want to say mix themselves, but they pretty much, I have to do way less in terms of the amount of processing I have to do. I have to do way less in terms of fader movements, getting emotion in there. To me, it's the core. Without a well-written song, without a well-recorded and produced song, you're literally just trying to finesse something that wasn't made well in the first place. So songwriting to me is the start of it, and from there, like I was saying, every step before it should be the best it can be, should be as good as it can be. But if it's not, then that's where my job kind of comes in to kind of finesse things and make them sound as good as possible. But yeah, I'm all for songwriting. Like I say, I've kind of started writing my own songs and everything since I was young, so I've always had that ear for songwriting. I think bit of a failed artist and never wanted to put anything out myself, but I still feel I have that kind of ear for it, and yeah, it just makes my job that much easier.
Well, let's not glaze over that then. Okay, so when you were young, you started writing songs. So what was your first instrument?
Guitar. So guitar's my first one, and then I don't call myself a singer. I can sing okay, but I would never consider myself a singer, if you know what I mean. That's always been my weak point, I'd say. But yeah, I've honestly, since I started picking up the guitar when I was 8 years old, I've just always written songs. And I'm not the most technically proficient guitarist as well. I think I stopped getting good in any way on guitar about 10 years ago. I kind of peaked, and then that was it. But just the fun of writing songs, as you've seen in my studio, I've got, how many here? 7 guitars to me here. I've got one behind me over there. So yeah, I still love sitting down and just playing and writing.
What were your early influences when it came to writing? Like, who did you want to emulate, if anyone?
Yeah, so the first artist I loved, and I can remember loving, was Bryan Adams.
Oh, nice.
Summer of '69 album. I don't know. I think it was one of the very rare albums that my mum listened to. My mum's not very into music. She's more into books and stuff. My dad's a humongous music. I don't want to call him nerd, but his breadth of music is insane to me, and that's kind of where I came up in, just listening to his records and everything that he was putting on. But yeah, Bryan Adams is like my earliest memory of a songwriter, and playing Summer of '69. I sat down and hand wrote out the lyrics in a pad of paper when I was, I don't know, I could have been like 9 or 10 or something like that. Um, and then yeah, from there it was just listening to anything that my dad had on until I was probably a teenager, and then I kind of developed my own tastes and got into things like grunge and nu metal and all these other things as well. So and then into reggae in the later years. So a very very wide kind of musical palette, but
Totally. I feel like if you're anywhere close to like between
yeah,
25 and 30, there was like a ska slash reggae season.
massive. Oh man, that was me for years. I was just heavily into all of that kind of stuff. And it's only I'd probably say yeah, I turned 30 in August. So it's only just now that I'd say not only just now I've got kind of gotten out of it, but I'm just over the last couple of years opened up my palette again to everything. Before that, I used to listen to so much different stuff, singer songwriters, like I say, kind of metal stuff as well, new metal, all that kind of thing. But yeah, ska was life for quite a while.
Well, that's awesome. Now, were you in bands and stuff, or was it always kind of solo in your bedroom, or?
Yeah, to be fair, it was always bands. So my first band was me and a friend in school. Again, I was like, honestly, I was 8 or 9 years old. He played drums. I just started learning guitar, and we would just write songs in his house. And his dad had an old, I can't even remember what it was, but a CD. It was a CD mixer where you'd record straight to CD disc, and that was kind of my first taste of recording, really. And then after that, it was a couple of bands in what you'd call high school. And that was where we did play like things like ska, funk, reggae. That was kind of our sound. And it was only when I got to about 18, 19, I went off to university, I stopped playing in bands and kind of focused on the studio stuff.
So let's talk about your university experience because, I studied music and I took some production classes. I observed many of my classmates who did production. Most of them aren't doing it any longer. We found out very quickly that, the guys who were putting in the time, of course, outside the classroom are the guys who are doing it now. Whereas the
Yeah.
guys who didn't want to put in the time after the classroom, maybe they thought they might be interested in it, but weren't after all. What
Yeah.
was your experience in college, and how much did the classes actually help your path versus how much time you put in by yourself?
Yeah, I very similar experience to be honest. I remember the first day there, we're in the lecture hall with everyone on the course, and I don't know how many people there were, maybe like 500 students or something like that. And I remember on the last lecture, on the last day, on the last year, year three for me, there was about 200 students, so maybe even less than that. It had whittled down. Over half of them had left over those 3 years. For that exact reason, I think a lot of them had liked the idea of doing music or were keen on it and thought it'd be this would be great to do, and then just either fell out of love with music or fell out of love with the course or something. But for me, going to university was always like the next logical step, kind of as you say. It was like, right, we'll go to school, and then go to college for 2 years, and then I went to university for three. But I had an interesting experience there. Like I say, the course was very broad, and I didn't really know what I wanted to do in music. I just knew I wanted to do music. I knew I wanted to go to university, and that was kind of it. Um, and it's interesting now when people ask me if I'd recommend going to university to people. I don't think I would. If you know what you want to do in life, so if you know you want to do recording or production or mixing, just try and do that from the time you leave school, because I have learned so much more from YouTube than I ever learned in university.
Yeah.
And it's just like, I paid a lot of money for the privilege of going there, and obviously it's part of it is the experience of living away from home and all of that kind of stuff, which I understand, and I wouldn't change it for, wouldn't change anything looking back. But recommending university for things like making music, I'm not sure I would. I would probably suggest people go find a local studio and see if you can get in there, or just start yourself. It's so much easier to just get a laptop now, a microphone, and start recording and start messing around and learn on YouTube. The knowledge that is out there now is completely different than what it was 10 years ago when I
Yeah.
wanted to go to university. So yeah,
I totally agree with you. Like, I mean, whether you go to university or not, I think what I have found is that for me, making music and writing songs is like breathing, right?
yeah,
I have to have it. It's not just the idea of it. It's it's everything I've ever wanted, and the only way that I can ever express a clear thought into the world. Even
Yeah.
talking, doesn't compare to like how I feel when like I've expressed something in a song
Yeah.
about
Yeah.
my deepest yearnings. And I feel that for guys on your end who, maybe you still write songs, but yeah, most of what you do is mixing, mastering. Like whether you went to university or not, this is what you were gonna do, you
Yeah.
know. And so I definitely don't mean to cast any shade on my friends who studied production thinking I like music, but it's like if you don't wake up with this like heavy weight on your chest to like get something out there into the world, and like you're not going to be satisfied until you do, it is kind of a fool's errand to spend all that money and and not be doing, what you want to do.
I totally agree, and there was a lot of people like I saw on the course who had that exact mentality. Like, I like music, I like playing, I think I want to do this, but it wasn't. I've just known from a very young age that no matter what it was going to be music in some way. And like you, I just have this like deep yearning to create in some way, and that's where mixing and mastering come in for me. Is it marries the two, the creative and the technical side in a very, I don't know, just a way that resonates with me. And I just get to tinker away in my studio, and nerd out on all the kind of stuff, and then send it off to someone, and then I've helped them get their creative dream out there as well. It's just definitely found what works for me, and what resonates for me. And I've tried, like I say, recording and producing and songwriting in the past, but this is just where the two kind of sides of my brain have married and landed. So
Yeah. So, how much production do you do at this point in your musical career?
really zero, to be honest. Like I say, so it was probably, when was it? 2018. I probably did my last actual production session at all. Saying that, I have actually gotten back in contact with an artist who I produced and worked with in 2018, and he wants to do another song. And now that I'm set up in this studio space, I feel like I'm more able to serve him and do that. But it'll be very select kind of clients I think that I would do that for, because again, I'm one of these people that I toe the line between, yeah, introvert and extrovert. I love going out and meeting people and chatting with them and everything, but I also really enjoy my own time and working on my own schedule and just doing my own thing. So, especially when it comes to um, creative things like making music, sometimes I've had experience in the past where you've rubbed the wrong way with someone, things don't work out, and you just get kind of bad vibe in the studio, and that's always been quite um, just uncomfortable for me. And I think that's probably another reason why I've ended up here being, just a guy in a room listening to music all day. But yeah, it's something I'm definitely not saying no to in the future, doing more production stuff. And especially now, like I say, I've set up the studio. But yeah, for now, my main focus is still just mixing and mastering.
As a songwriter who also
Yeah.
produces, I have learned over time, the best way to say, like, when to get in touch with a mixing engineer, how to clean up my tracks and stems, how to label them and,
Yeah.
and bounce them out appropriately. At what point does an artist usually get a hold of you to say, hey, I'd like to explore some mixing?
Yeah, to be fair, most of the time it's once everything's done. There's a rare occasion where people are like, "I'm in the process of doing this, and I'm just shopping around." But for the most part, they're like, "I have one song, 10 songs, whatever it is, good to go." And then at that point, we'd jump on a call, and I'll just make sure that we're, aligned and everything before we go ahead with it. But yeah, for the most part, everything's kind of already done. And so I do have a set of kind of guidelines where how I like to receive files, but I've also found that making them too strict is really off-putting for clients, and it's just making more work for them when I could do it on my end. And at the end of the day, they're paying me to mix for them, so I try and make it as easy as possible for them to send me files, but I do like them to be at least labeled correctly. So,
Yeah.
nothing like audio 27, audio, none of that. And then, yeah, they send a Dropbox link or we transfer whatever, and then I just drop them into my session and get going.
What advice might you give a bedroom producer who's writing songs and recording his or her own stuff? Like, as someone on the receiving end of audio files, is there any
Yeah.
advice that you would give give bedroom producers to kind of keep upping the game on what they're sending you?
Yeah, absolutely. Like I talk to a lot of people about this, and again, it varies. So I understand budget comes into play in terms of what people can afford to get as a home studio, in their equipment. But ideally, the best you can afford microphone, the best you can afford preamp. So those are key, But at the same time, it doesn't really matter how good your microphone is or how good your preamp is. If your room sounds like trash, it's going to pick up in the microphone. So, kind of, if you can afford $100, $200 microphone and you have some change, I would highly recommend trying to build some kind of acoustic treatment. It doesn't have to be what I've done, these 8-foot panels or anything like that, but just some kind of acoustic treatment. It will save you tons of time and save your mix engineer tons of time and headaches down the road, because the last thing you want is a really nice diaphragm condenser that's super like super sensitive, picking up all of this room noise in an echoey room. So that would be my first bit of advice, is just try and get some kind of treatment, even if it's just heavy curtains or something, or you sing into your curtains, or you hang up your duvet or whatever it is, just something to kind of baffle the sound a little bit. I've seen a lot online, a kind of misnomer about how you should set up acoustic treatment when recording vocals. A lot of people suggest to put them behind the microphone to stop reflections, but if you actually think about it, the microphone's picking up from this direction, so it's much better to have the acoustic treatment behind you. So as you're singing, any reflections coming off of the back wall aren't then bouncing back into the microphone. If you're lucky, if you have one of these Shure SM7Bs, they're great at rejecting stuff from the back. So have this pointing out into the room, have your acoustic treatment behind you. And then from there, it's just getting good at having good headroom, so no clipping when you're recording. We're at a point where everything's so clean and pristine, you could have your volume right down. You're not going to introduce any hiss as I start cranking it up at the other end. So good clean headroom as you're recording, decent quality microphone, some acoustic treatment, and I'd say you're 75% of the way there. And from that point, it's just playing around with microphone placement, which is a kind of, I'm not going to say it's a dark art because it's not, but that's something I know when I first started kind of recording and messing around. I was like, moving the microphone around, how does that change anything? I'll just set it up here and hit record and it'll be fine. But if you take the time to move your microphone around, test where it sounds good on your guitar or test where it sounds good on whatever instrument you're recording, you'll soon learn where things sound good, where they don't sound good. You can talk to your producer or mix engineer if you've got a good relationship with them and say, does this sound good? Would you suggest me trying something different? Anything to get it as good as possible. So the next stage is kind of sound as good as possible.
Yeah. I talked to a potential client the other day who has actually put out quite a bit of music, and at one point they were gifted a microphone, and the word on the street was that this microphone was a $2,000 mic.
No
and
way.
so they get recording, and the singer's like, is this mic good? Is it sounding good? And the engineer's like, yeah, this is great. This is a great microphone. Anyways, so they ship it off for mixing, and at one point the mix engineer, who's like a big Nashville guy, is like, hey, what microphone is this? And so they look at it and they're like, oh, it's an MXL 990. And are you familiar with that brand?
I've heard of them. Yeah.
I mean, I think you can get them from Guitar Center for like less than $70.
Brilliant.
And
hoodwinked.
I know, this whole time he thought it was like a $2,000 microphone. Now here's what's interesting. Obviously, it was like, oh my gosh, some egg on my face. We put all this effort into this recording, and the vocals do not sound as good as they ought to.
Yeah.
But he did say this, because, dude, not everybody can afford. I mean, even an SM7B like you have, that's like a $400 microphone, or maybe if you get a deal, $300, right? And I'm speaking American dollar, so I don't know about.
Yeah. No, it's about the same. Yeah.
Mine is this is actually the new Audio Technica podcast mic, and these are really affordable, like $80.
Nice. It sounds great.
But like, I was thinking about it. The guy, the client said on the songs where he put a blanket over his head and recorded into the MXL 990, those were the best sounding songs. And so that does actually prove your point that it does not matter how expensive your microphone is. If your room sounds like trash, if there's no treatment, you're cruising for a bruising, as I like to say.
100%.
I'm allowed to say that because I'm a dad. And so, I mean, I think that is a great encouragement for our bedroom producers out there writing songs. This isn't sexy, but just put up some blankets in a
Yep.
closet and see if you can get it. I would say, you tell me if you agree with this. See if you can get it gained up enough so that you can be back, a good 6, 7 inches, maybe even a
Yeah.
foot, so that you don't have this like really low proximity effect.
That's a really good point, actually, is that a lot of people, again, it's this microphone technique, don't understand that, right up here, obviously it gets really bassy, but then as you move back here, it's more open and less direct. So that makes a massive difference. But for things like large diaphragm condensers, they work best when you do have a good, foot in between you and the capsule, provided the room sounds good. When you get, again, worse sounding rooms, the closer up you are, it kind of negates the sound of the room. But yeah, absolutely. If you can throw up a few blankets or even get underneath one and and record yourself, by all means, whatever you can do to get it working. And yeah.
Now that we've nerded out a little bit on production and
Brilliant.
some songwriting stuff, are there some songs that you've mixed and mastered in the last year or so that you're like, dude, I'm so proud of that. Like, where can we find
Yeah.
those songs of yours?
Yeah, for me, the best examples of my work are still on my website. Those are the ones where I'm like, if anyone wants to come and find me, those are what I want to be known for and people to hear, because for whatever reason, either the song's great in the first place and the emotion and everything, or just because of the kind of genres they are, which is that indie folk acoustic kind of stuff, which I really enjoy doing. I'd say that's the best place to kind of go and find me. But as someone who is trying to make a living doing this, I'm open to working with lots of other people as well. So recently, a band who's just released an EP are called Restless Youth, and they're quite a young band from the UK, but they have such a great mix of, it's like jazz, folk, spoken word kind of thing going on, and I've not heard anything like it. And as soon as I heard the rough recordings, I was like, I want to mix this because this is so cool. So anything that's kind of got, I'm a sucker for just well written songs and anything that's kind of got good vibe to it. But yeah, that's something I'm quite proud of. That it only came out 2-3 days ago, I think, that EP. So yeah, well worth checking out.
Okay, yeah. Anything coming down the pipeline, bands that from the UK or from, I guess you're probably not just mixing local, of course, you're mixing from all over, but
Yes, there's this band again. So I've been working with them for 3-4 years now, called Cat Ryan, and they're kind of like an indie pop band, I'd say, based in Newcastle. And again, they just write really great guitar based pop songs, which are just so fun, so well written, really cool. Yeah, I think they're one of my favorite bands that I've kind of worked with recently. But like you say, I'm working with people kind of all over the world, luckily, which is really nice. A band or a group that I've just started working with called True Outcomes from New York. They're a husband and wife duo, acoustic duo, but we just started working with them. Yeah, that's something I'm really looking forward to. They've got a huge bank of songs that we're going to try and churn through and get out for them. So, yeah, lots of fun stuff kind of on the horizon.
that's awesome. How much of the business that you get is people finding you versus you being proactive, listening to music, and reaching out to potential clients?
Yeah, this is something that I've kind of been working on a lot over the last couple of years and kind of refining my approach. But my kind of strategy at the moment is put out good content. First of all, it's just stuff that people will find helpful. And so many mixing engineers and mastering engineers fall in the trap of trying to show how good they are at mixing and like, look at me using this plugin and here's how you make drums sound really huge and fat. And it's like, all right, that's cool, but artists aren't interested in that. What they're interested in is how to write songs, how to book more shows, how to get more streams on Spotify. Like, that's the kind of stuff that artists are wanting to do. So I want to be that form of education for them and put out useful content so that when they come to my page, they're like, okay, Elliott's actually providing some good value here and I really enjoy what he's doing. So that's kind of like my top level, just put out good content and regularly as well. But on the other side of that is I do spend a lot of time on Instagram just flicking through reels, going through hashtags, listening to new music, letting people know if I think it's really cool and starting a conversation. And it's really not in any kind of salesy way. I'm not trying to be like, I'm a mix engineer, you should hire me to do your next EP. It's just more like, I love what you're doing, keep doing it, and have a little chat with them. And then if they want to hire me, they can hire me. And if they don't, fine. But there's just no, I think the worst thing you can do is just try and be pushy and be like, you should hire me because your recordings are rubbish. It's like, no one wants to hear that. So yeah, just put out good content, have chats with as many people as you can, and from that, people just start to naturally look towards you for work. So
I guess we didn't even talk about like references, reference tracks and like what you
yeah,
do to make sure that like what you're mixing is sounding like what you want it to.
yeah,
Um,
that that. I'm happy to, if you want to, we could just drop this in.
yeah, well, let's talk about it.
About Yeah, cool. So for me, referencing is massive in terms of how I know what I'm doing is good. It's been, again, it's trial and error over the years, but just recently, having made these panels in the last few months in this room, it took me a little while to get used to how everything was sounding in here, and that was just a case of every morning just coming in, putting on Spotify, and just sitting and listening for an hour whilst I did emails or whatever else, just to hear what music sounds like in here. Because fair enough, everyone has sets of headphones, everyone has speakers, but if you don't know how music is meant to sound coming out of them, then it's really hard to know what you're doing is correct and you're making the right kind of choices. But also on that, what I found really helpful is I bought the Slate VSX headphones. I don't know if you've heard
Oh,
about
I
those.
have. Do you dig them?
They're awesome, man. They have been. I mean, to the point where I do about 50% of my mixing on these. I would start with them up on my big speakers and just get a good balance and start mixing. But about halfway through the process, I chuck these on, and there's a couple of root models that I really like, and again, no, because I've listened to a lot of music through them. But for anyone that's kind of just starting out and doesn't have, thousands of pounds to spend on acoustic treatment and speakers, these are, I think, 400 quid, maybe $500 or something like that. The best investment you could probably make in terms of how to get decent sounding productions and mixes at home, because they're just headphones. Your room has nothing to do with how it sounds. You can reference about 10 different spots. Yeah, and then once you're finished and everything sounds good in all of those rooms, that your mix is done basically.
Well, yeah, and I mean for the bedroom producer, it actually makes sense if you can't afford really good monitoring, and you'll at least know while you're recording if the sounds you're getting are good, right?
Yeah,
And if you feel like those are pretty accurate headphones, then you can kind of know with at least some certainty that like what I send to the mix engineer is what I think I'm sending to the mix engineer, right? Like,
yeah, absolutely. There could be a disparity between that sometimes, isn't it? You could listen on your headphones and be like, "Oh, this sounds great." I know this sounds good. It doesn't sound too boomy or something. And then I pull them up on my headphones, and it could be, "Oh, there's no low end in there." Like, it's for some reason the way that it was recorded is completely devoid of any kind of low end. So, yeah, having just good quality headphones, and they don't have to be these ones. There's hundreds of good quality ones out there, but just something that as you're recording, what you're recording is the most accurate representation of it. You set yourself up for success that way.
yeah. And then the only way to know if it's accurate, I think, is in some ways via references like we just described, right? Like if you're wanting to sound like Dashboard, right? So you listen to Dashboard on your headphones, then you
Yeah,
record it in your space. And if it doesn't sound anything like it, then that probably means that you need to make some adjustments, move your
yeah,
microphone, set up some treatment, whatever, try something else.
absolutely.
But
Yeah,
yeah,
that
very practical. We don't think about it that way. We just think, right, I set a microphone and it should sound right, or the mix engineer can take care of it. you
yeah,
know?
yeah, exactly. Yeah, fix it in the mix. No, 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 no.
No, we're not. We're going to try not to do that, us
Yeah,
bedroom producers. So I've grown a lot in that this last year, but
yeah.
dude,
It's
nice.
it's and it's interesting. The other thing is, like, on that point is you wouldn't pull up a piano sound, a virtual instrument that sounds nothing like your reference track, record it and play it, and then send it off to your mix engineer and say, "Can you make it sound like that?"
Right.
Like, you wouldn't do that with a virtual instrument because you've got the ability to change it and switch it and make the right choice. So if you can think about recording guitars or vocals or something in a similar way, I've got the option right now as I'm recording this to move away and get more of a space between it, or come up nice and close and it's nice and intimate. Like, whatever it is, make the decision then and there, and you avoid issues down the line.
Yes. Dude, I'm glad we dropped that
Cool.
in. Actually, that was
Yeah, yeah,
good. These
nice.
are lessons that producers like me and songwriters like trying to do their own thing in the studio, they have to learn them if they want
Yeah,
to be happy with the end result. It's just not
yeah.
all on you.
Yeah, exactly. It's all the preceding point, isn't it? Like we're saying, a good master is a good mix. A good mix is a good production. Good production is a good recording. Like, it goes all the way back to songwriting.
Mm.
So a well-written song makes a fantastic master, and it goes through that whole process to that point. And if you skip one of those steps, or you mess around in them, or don't give it the attention it needs, you haven't fulfilled that song's potential.
Dude, okay, so I'm going to repeat that, and that's what we're going to end with. So, a good master is a good mix, is a good production, is a good recording, is a good song.
Yeah, there you go. That's it. That's the recipe.
All the way back. I love that. Dude, thank you again, man.
Cool. No worries at all, mate. It's a pleasure. Absolute pleasure.